Can you go crazy from loneliness? Or maybe going crazy pushes everyone else away and causes loneliness. Sorry, I was just thinking that you and everyone else who sees this would think I'm crazy. Maybe that's actually the best case scenario. Well, believe me or not, I've been stuck in Groundhog's Day loop for years now. I already know what most of you are thinking, but no, it's not secretly awesome. Mainly because each loop ends with my death. I didn't realize it for a long time, but I suspect I had been peacefully dying in my sleep. Ironically, now that I know the truth, it's not easy for me to get to sleep before I start to die. Instead, the more I try to confront the fact I'm in a loop, the more brutal the death. This is one of the many reasons that I've come to the conclusion that the universe just simply hates me. I knew I was in a loop long before trying to escape, but I thought I hadn't been able to find a way out. Definitely not before the loop starts again. One problem is that my bank account is always the same. I can't hop on a plane or make it very far in just a day. I've had plenty of vacations, but that's just me not going to work and just staying in my crappy apartment. I've tried turning to religion and other mystics, but didn't see a change from one loop to the next, so I quickly stopped trying there. But I experienced my first violent death when I finally took escaping the loop seriously. I guess I thought it was awesome enough in the beginning too. I realized though, that I'd never get around to writing that book I've always had in mind. I'd never get back in shape, and I'd never get married. Oh, and for the record, I didn't list those things in priority to me. Either way, I was finally ready to start living, but even as I figured out what I wanted to do, the loop kept happening over and over and over again. Then I went to bed, but didn't sleep. I laid awake dreading the next loop and regretting yet another day that didn't result in change. And then I got the change in the worst way possible. I was just laying there, unable to move out of apathy or sleep paralysis. I'm still not sure which, but when my stomach started to hurt, the first time I ever felt it that bad. The pain grew and it traveled upwards until I found myself spewing acidic black sludge all over the bed. Then I could move, just enough to get up on one arm and lean over to throw up on the floor. It just keeps pouring out of my mouth with each heave. It wasn't long before blood accompanied the sludge. I felt like my guts were just being ripped out. With a painful final heave, I collapsed back into the bed and felt my body sag inward. I could also feel myself losing consciousness as it fades away. And then it was morning again. My alarm told me it was time to go to work because, of course, the loop had restored me. However, I was actually disappointed to find myself alive again. To be honest, that first time I quickly dismissed the death as just a bad dream. Understandable, given that the loop cleaned up the bloody mess for me. But then it happened again and again. Not always the same way though. Sometimes I felt a heartache that grew and got so bad that I'd feel that kind of bad pop in my chest before blacking out and waking up in another loop. Or my head would hurt like 1,000 migraines and I'd feel my brain cooking inside of my own skull before its juices just ran out of my ears. Then the loop would save me, of course. I've died 100 deaths since the first violent one, but absolutely nothing has changed. My bank account stays the same, my story is unwritten, and I'm still here. But at least I'll live forever inside a time loop, right? That might be what you're thinking, that I just have to stay optimistic and eventually I'll find a way out. Yeah, well, there's some key differences between that, which what I'm going through, and actually living it. The biggest being that the day changes and I've been aging normally as far as I can tell. It's just that the same events are repeating. I see the same people who say and do the exact same things day after day. The stories I read in the newspapers, they're all the same, just with a different date. But the most gut-wrenching and heartbreaking thing to suffer through is how many times I keep making these same mistakes, day after day, week after week. What's crazier, doing the same thing and expecting a different result, or continuing to do the same thing even when you know exactly what the result will be. I don't know why I even bother trying to think up new stories when I know exactly what will happen. I'll never get them written down. I'll die some more tonight, only to wake up and start it all over again. My only solace is that every night my death feels a little worse. Maybe one of these loops will actually stick. I think I'd have to be crazy to hope otherwise.
It's so nice to finally meet you. Mrs. Gray told me you would be coming. A woman with light blonde hair greeted me kindly after I introduced myself. She ushered me to the back and helped me through a safety gate that separated the infants from the toddlers. I closed it behind me. The pleasure is all mine. Deborah has told me so much about you. Jennifer, right? She turned to look at me, her cheeks flushing a soft pink color. It was not lost on me that my looks were aesthetically pleasing. Yes, sir. Call me Brian, I offered. Oh, but Brian. She swallowed hard. Well, Lucy is ready to go. Just let me wake her up. She disappeared through a door in a hurry, and I walked over to the rack on my left. I knew that Lucy's diaper bag was the bright pink frozen one. Her mother bought almost every item of merchandise the film had to offer. It was ridiculous, really. I ran my fingers over the material and slung the bag over my shoulder. The sound of cooing brought me back to reality, and I turned to see a small bundle wrapped up in a muslin cloth, little hands reaching out. The woman handed her over to me as her blue eyes met mine. A gummy smile broke out across her tiny face. I leant down and kissed her forehead. My beautiful baby. Aw, she misses you. Will you be dropping her off tomorrow morning, Brian? Jennifer asked. I looked up and shook my head. No, my wife will be. I only had a half day today and decided to do the run. Her smile faltered a little. Oh, of course. Well, don't forget to sign out at the door, and you two have a great afternoon. She reached over and gently pinched her cheek. I thanked the woman, then pulled Lucy close to my chest. I chose to leave without signing anything. We walked together to my car. I parked it around the corner and under a tree. Her safety seat was already set up, waiting for her to be buckled into it. Time to go home, sweetie, she answered back with a string of nonsensical blabbering, smiling as she did. I settled her in. I know that Lucy isn't mine, but after watching her mother for so many years, it felt like she was. I'm glad that I finally tapped into their home phone a few weeks back. Otherwise, I would have never known that this would be the first day Brian would pick his daughter up from daycare.
I walked downstairs to find my wife sitting at the kitchen table, drinking her coffee, a smug smile plastered across her face. I heaved a sigh but didn't say anything. I got so sick of that smug smile of hers. She had more money than me, had more friends than me, was even better at sex than I was. And none of this would have mattered if she didn't enjoy rubbing it in my face so much, always giving me that smug smile. I left without a word to her, her smug smile the only last thing I saw as I left the house. And that smile haunted my entire day. It was all I saw when I closed my eyes. I saw it in every other smile I saw throughout the day. And it was driving me crazy, and it had been for months now. I just wanted to be rid of her stupid, smug smile. So on my way home, I bought more ammo for my shotgun. I'd only had the thing for about a week, but I was ready to put it to the test. So I got home, stuck the box of shells in my coat pocket, and then walked inside. And I could hear her in the kitchen puttering around as I went upstairs and loaded the shotgun. And with a clicking sound as I pumped the gun, I headed downstairs to the kitchen. She didn't even turn around as I put the gun to the back of her head and blew away that smug smile. And then I dragged her body into our fenced backyard and buried her in the hole I'd left dug for the septic tank. And then I went upstairs to bed. And there she was, at the kitchen table the next morning, still covered in dirt, as she sipped her coffee with that smug smile. I know this was the 20th attempt, but she didn't have to be so smug about it.
I was only a few months old when my mother passed away. She was a nature enthusiast who lived for hiking, but consequently, it would be the death of her as well. Her body was found at the bottom of a mountainside she frequented. The impact of the fall was so severe that my family had to have a closed casket funeral. I only know Mom through stories my dad tells me and the many videotapes she left behind before her passing. My mother loved to document her hikes. She would give tips, record the beautiful scenery, and, in some videos, just discuss life. I've watched hundreds of these videos, and it's the only real connection I have to her. Mom was the breadwinner, and since her passing, the family has been financially strapped. My father has taken on 2 jobs to make ends meet, but it's coming to the point where we'll have to downsize or outright move. Oddly enough, I think our neighbor Ralph is taking it harder than me and Dad. Ralph has been like a second father to me, always there to talk to, always buying me things I needed and offering to help whenever he could. My dad said he's a creep, but I think he's a good guy and I'll miss him. As I was packing my things up from the shed, I saw something strange. A floorboard was missing that I hadn't noticed before, and there was a filthy trash bag with a couple videos and a camcorder inside. My curiosity piqued, and I decided to go into my room to watch the videos. I popped in the first tape, and I couldn't believe my eyes. It was my mother with Ralph. They were naked in a room. Jesus Christ. It was a sex tape. I removed the tape before my eyes burned out of their sockets. I put in the second tape and saw my mom crying into the camera. She said that she was pregnant and Ralph was the father. I cried and screamed into my pillow with anger and despair. I felt bad for myself. I felt bad for my father. I was furious with Ralph. But did he even know? Did Dad? Then I noticed that a tape remained in the camcorder. It was my mom on one of her hikes. Wait, I recognized those clothes. Those were the clothes she was wearing when she died. This was recorded on the day of her death. As I watched, my mother reached the mountainside where she fell to her death. I was about to eject the tape, but then I heard something. It was the voice of a man, and my mom seemed startled. Then it happened. The camera captured the very moment of a man's hands pushing my mother to her death. "What are you watching there?" I heard coming from the window. The same voice that was heard in the video. An eerie silence filled the air as my dad and I locked eyes.
Okay, so I haven't seen a clock or the outside world for a while, so I can't be sure, but I believe it's day 17 of my forced incarceration. Constant screams and demonic laughter echo through the halls of this hellhole. The shock therapy torture has increased each day, and they've even begun experimenting with lobotomy surgery, with horrific results. Asylum patients are seen as subhuman to many. Once dropped off here, it's like entering a portal to another world. Family doesn't visit, and the state leaves full control of the facility to the doctors, nurses, and guards. That means as this torture is racking up, nobody from the outside world is coming to save us. Nobody knows or even cares what's happening behind these walls. Food rations have been put into place for the sheer purpose of inflicting suffering. They force medication into us, oftentimes on an empty stomach, which creates awful nausea and discomfort. They prance around the facility in matching white uniforms, bestowing the phony title of doctors and nurses upon themselves. But in reality, they're just an organized mob. I've been observing the behavior at night, and what I've seen is terrifying. Increasingly, people have been forcefully removed from their rooms, and none have returned. The last few days I've been marched into the cafeteria. I've been overwhelmed by a repugnant odor. I tell myself that I'm crazy, and it can't be what I think it is. My mind races with inhuman thoughts, but I'm starving. So I eat the chunky meat soup as served, and I don't dare question what it is. I've only remained alive because of my obedience. The beatings have become increasingly violent, and they've began raiding rooms without notice, looking for contraband. Paranoia has set in, and they believe that we're planning a revolt. Discovery of this note is a certain death sentence, so I have to hide it away now. I pray order can be restored. But if not, I leave this as evidence of the horrible conditions and atrocities that have been committed under this roof. God save us all. Dr. Williams. Day 17 of inmates running the asylum.
It's been years since my daughter begged for a puppy, and I finally caved. After work, I would take her over to the local puppy shop run by old Earl. Earl had been running the establishment for close to 3 decades now, and had become somewhat of an unofficial mayor of our small town. Service was friendly, he was very reasonable with pricing, and the dogs always seemed to have a full lifespan. My shift ran late, and I scrambled to reach the shop with my daughter, as Earl was closing pretty soon. I even managed to ding a sign while parking in the rush to get there. He was kind enough to let us in, and we made small talk while he gave my daughter a few treats, and told her to pick the lucky pup. As my daughter gleefully ran around the shop, I took old Earl out to inspect the sign damage. He laughed it off and said that he'd call it even with the purchase of a puppy. When we walked back inside, my daughter was missing. It's a small shop, and I began to think that she wandered outside to find us at some point. I tried to keep my calm, but Earl filled me with some concern when he told me that he would need to check the basement because the drugs used for euthanization were stored down there. After a thorough check, Earl said she wasn't down there, and I was filled with some relief. Moments later, my daughter wandered back inside through the entrance doors. I pulled her in close and told her to never scare me like that again. She looked upset, and when I asked her which puppy she had chosen, she told me she just wanted to go home. I apologized to Earl for the inconvenience, told him that she must be frazzled from my panic of her missing, and we would be back tomorrow. As we drove home, I asked my daughter why she had wandered off and why she couldn't choose a puppy. Tears filled her eyes, and she told me that she had run out of dog treats and looked around the shop for some more. That's when she walked down to the basement area and became upset. She told me it wasn't fair that all the dogs upstairs would find a home, and that the kids locked in the basement wouldn't.
Please leave your message